Welcome back. Artificial intelligence is emerging as a tool for terror groups used to generate and translate propaganda, plan attacks and craft recruitment messages at scale. A Singapore terrorism report warns. The Internal Security Department says the overall threat to Singapore remains high. Aslam Shah with this report.
2 weeks. That's how quick it could take today for a person to be radicalized. The next wave of extremism could be powered by AI, coded, curated, and shared at speed. A deepfake video today can, for example, show a famous person delivering an extremist propaganda speech, even though it never happened. With AI, such content is now easier than ever to create and harder to detect. Manipulated videos like these can then quickly spread in multiple versions and languages. The latest Internal Security Department or ISD report also reveals that only about 4 in 10 people will contact the authorities if they believe that a loved one is showing signs of radicalization. But one expert warns that the cost of not reporting is far greater.
If indeed an attack could have been prevented on your loved one, would you have wanted someone else to report? And that's often that tension in that case where we see at hand. It is that tension between wanting to report and knowing that at the end of the day, when you're thinking about the processes in Singapore, the escalation to violence would mean that the hand of the law would be much, much tougher.
Global events continue to influence youth exposure to extremist narratives. Since July last year, 8 self-radicalized people were dealt with under the Internal Security Act. Half were influenced by the Israel-Palestine conflict. And they are getting younger. Of those 8, half were aged 20 or below. Since 2015, 9 of the 17 youths handled under the ISA had planned attacks in Singapore using knives or other easily available weapons.
My suggestion is that for all parents and teachers, if they detect any signs of radicalization, inform the government. Government will treat those who are radicalized humanely, and after they are de-radicalized, they will be returned back to the mainstream of Singapore society. Even their identities will not be made public.
ISD says there is no specific intelligence of any imminent terrorist attack against Singapore, but it adds that Singapore and its allies remain attractive targets because of its close ties with the West and Israel, its iconic landmarks, and its circular and multicultural society.
And let's get further input on this from Kenneth Yeo. He is Associate Research Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at NTU. Mr. Yeo, welcome to the program. So, first of all, what are the implications of this finding by ISD that AI is being used to self-radicalize youth?
There are 3 implications. Firstly, it's the increased access into terrorist content. So, for example, for an individual who does not have language capabilities to understand terrorist content, they now can use AI to translate these propaganda messages. Next is, of course, increased volume, because AI is able to generate massive amounts of terrorist propaganda in a split second. So that would allow the volume of propaganda to be to be spread in a much rapid manner. The final thing is the personalization of propaganda. So using chatbots, for example, we are able to then optimize the ideological synergy, ideological resonance to the individual.
And why are youths more, particularly more vulnerable to AI propaganda, you think?
I think youths are generally just more vulnerable to antisocial behavior. For example, with or without AI. So for example, if we look at reports on conflict, countries with higher rates of young and unemployed males tend to have a higher chance of having an internal conflict. Even in criminal data, we see that younger people are more likely to commit crime and recidivate. So it's the same as terrorism, where impulse, the ability to regulate emotions, it's not completely mature, and therefore it's easier for youth to be radicalized by terrorist propaganda. Adding on the high internet penetration rate and also the them being digital natives, it's easy for them to access this material online.
You know, with AI being so accessible now, right? Is it even possible to stop or control its use when it comes to spreading extremist content online?
That's a great question. I believe it's difficult to understand what do we mean by stop the use of AI, because do we prevent AI, prevent terrorists from using AI, or do we then prevent the propagation of AI? And these two mechanisms are very different. So how do we firstly create guidelines for artificial intelligence companies to ensure that their safe use for AI? And then on the enforcement side, how do we then detect the use of AI in chat bots and deepfakes to ensure that these messages are interdicted efficiently?
So we are seeing more cases of self-radicalization among increasingly younger individuals, right? So what sort of specific programs have been introduced to counter this trend, and have you seen any positive outcomes so far?
Right, so there are three ways to think about this programs introduced by Singapore. So firstly, it's the explicit programs where hard legislation is being put in place, where educational programs are being introduced into schools, and where the digital space is being regulated very, very effectively. The second layer, it's really enforcement. When a threat is being detected, are they reported? And are they then, are the enforcement officers able to respond to these threats? And the final, it's really tacit transfer of knowledge, tacit transfer of information through socialization. So we have a very strong social cohesion, social mixing matrix that we have in Singapore. So I think that's very precious, because I believe social cohesion, it's the first line of defense against terrorism. And the report today shows success by the Singapore authorities, mainly because we are able to prevent attacks from being happening. Although they are really real threats, the enforcement officers are able to prevent them from escalating further.
But are there specific challenges that you face when trying to engage at-risk youth?
I think there is always a challenge to engage at-risk youth, because today what we are experiencing, it's a diversification of terrorist propaganda, terrorist ideologies. So we're no longer dealing with a single type of threat, for example, from Jemaah Islamiyah, from the Islamic State. But today we also experience threats from far-right extremism. And this diversity of propaganda and ideologies makes it very difficult for counselors, for example, to engage in de-radicalization programs. So there's more time and resources required to de-radicalize an individual. However, I would say that about 93% of the individuals detained by the ISD has been released back to the society.
Another finding from this report is that about 4 in 10 people will contact the authorities if they believed that a loved one is showing signs of radicalization. That's relatively a low number. So how can we encourage more people to step forward, to do the right thing and take that critical step?
I think it's important to understand that it's not a death sentence. So if we are reporting our loved ones to the authorities, there are programs to ensure that the individual is being de-radicalized and reintegrated back to the society. So ultimately, by reporting your loved ones to the authority, it's helping your loved ones instead of sabotaging their lives.
The ISD says that there is no specific intelligence of any imminent terrorist threat against, or terrorist attack rather, against Singapore at this point, but the overall threat remains high. How should we read this, Mr. Yeo? Should we be worried at all?
I think we need to be optimistically vigilant. For now, we are able, the authorities are able to prevent attacks from being happening. They are able to interdict individuals who are radicalized. But at the same time, we know that we are a prize target for terrorist groups. We are a cosmopolitan society. We are a society that represents prosperity and multiculturalism. And so these are values that terrorists are against. So I think we have to be optimistically vigilant moving forward.
All right, Mr. Yeo, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us tonight. That was Kenneth Yeo from RSIS.